My husband came home from his secret affair expecting a perfect life, but instead he found his entire world for sale on our front lawn. The lie was almost laughably cliché, a last-minute work conference in a city just far enough away to require an overnight stay for the whole weekend. Mark had packed his bag with an almost theatrical display of reluctance, sighing about how much he'd miss me, how he'd rather just be home, curled up on the sofa watching a movie. He even kissed me goodbye with a look of feigned sorrow in his eyes, a look I now realize was just guilt. I played along, of course. I made him his favorite travel coffee, tucked a little note into his suitcase telling him to have a good trip, and waved from the doorway until his Audi disappeared around the corner. The perfect, supportive wife. The truth? There was no conference. There was only Chloe, bubbly, blonde Chloe from his marketing department, 26 years old and utterly infatuated with my successful, handsome, and very much married husband. I knew because he'd made the most classic, idiotic mistake a cheater can make in the 21st century. He forgot about the shared family cloud account. As I was uploading photos from my niece's birthday party, a new folder synced automatically. Its title was simply Us. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked on it. It wasn't photos, it was a video, a 30-second clip clearly taken by her of them laughing in a hotel room, a bottle of champagne on the nightstand. Mark was looking at her with an expression of unguarded adoration I hadn't seen directed at me in years. He leaned in and kissed her, and that was it. The world tilted on its axis. The first hour was a void. I just sat on the floor of my home office staring at the screen, the video playing on a silent, torturous loop. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it impossible to breathe. Tears streamed down my face, hot and useless. I felt pathetic, small and utterly broken. But then, as the shock began to recede, something else took its place. It started as a low ember in the pit of my stomach, a flicker of heat that began to chase away the cold numbness. It was rage, pure, unadulterated, and strangely clarifying. Something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. I had given this man 15 years of my life. I had supported his career, managed our home, and loved him with everything I had. And this was my reward? To be replaced by a cheap imitation and a weekend lie? No, absolutely not. I didn't want to scream or cry anymore. I wanted to dismantle his world. I wanted to hit him where it would hurt the most, and I knew exactly where that was. It wasn't his heart. That was clearly already on loan. It was his pride, his things. Mark loved his possessions with a reverence he never showed people. His collection of vintage watches, his custom-fitted golf clubs, his wall of first-edition books, his designer suits he only wore to important meetings. They were trophies, symbols of the perfect life he'd built, a life I had helped build, a life that was, as of this weekend, a complete fraud. My plan formed with a cold, beautiful precision. Saturday morning, I was a woman possessed. I pulled everything, and I mean everything, that was exclusively his out of our house and onto the front lawn. The expensive espresso machine he used once a month, out. The leather recliner he called his throne, dragged onto the grass. His tailored suits were hung on a portable clothing rack. His precious golf clubs were propped against a tree. I made signs with a thick black marker on bright poster board. "Liar's fire sale," one screamed. "Everything must go just like his morals," read another. I priced everything to sell and sell fast. His $1,000 watches, $20 a piece. The $5,000 golf clubs, $50 for the set. I posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, and within an hour, our lawn looked like a Black Friday stampede. People came in droves, giddy at the insane bargains. My friends came too, not to shop, but to form a protective, supportive barrier around me, slinging cheap paperbacks and overpriced cufflinks with righteous fury. By Sunday evening, the lawn was nearly clear. The last few scavengers were picking over the dregs as I watched from the living room window, a cup of tea in my hand, feeling an unnerving sense of peace. And then I saw it. The familiar headlights of his Audi turning onto our street. My heart gave a single hard thud, not of fear, but of anticipation. The show was about to begin. He pulled into the driveway, a weary, self-satisfied look on his face. He walked up the path, probably already crafting his story about how tedious the conference was and how he couldn't wait to see me. He put his key in the lock, turned it, and swung the door open. "Honey, I'm home," he called out, a wide, fake smile plastered on his face. I didn't say a word. I just stood there in the middle of the living room and met his gaze. His smile faltered when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. I just gave him a small, tight smile and nodded my head towards the large picture window that overlooked the front yard. He followed my gaze, his eyes still clouded with ignorance. And then he saw it. He saw our neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, a man who hadn't bought new clothes since the 1980s, doing a little twirl on the sidewalk. He saw the last of the bargain hunters walking away carrying his things. He saw the empty spaces on our lawn where his worldly treasures used to be. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. His jaw went slack. His designer weekend bag slipped from his grasp and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. He came home from his mistress's all weekend only to turn pale at the sight of his entire life being sold for pocket change, with the final crowning jewel of the scene being Mr. Henderson proudly strutting away down the street, wearing Mark's favorite $1,000 Armani suit. What did you do?" he finally stammered, his voice a strangled whisper. His eyes darted around the now cavernously empty living room, noticing for the first time the bare walls where his prized art collection used to hang, the empty alcove where his grandfather's antique globe once stood. "Laura, what the hell is this? Where is all my stuff?" The shock was rapidly curdling into fury. His face, once pale, was now flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. "I sold it," I said, my voice as calm and even as a frozen lake. I took a slow sip of my tea. "Mr. Henderson got a great deal on that suit, don't you think? It was always a little snug on you anyway." "You sold it?" he roared, taking a step towards me. "My watches, my first editions. Are you insane? That was my inheritance. That was our future." "No, Mark," I said, setting the teacup down on the one remaining end table. "That was your collection. Our future was something you spent the weekend with in a hotel room in the city. Her name is Chloe, right? Blonde, bubbly, 26. I hope the conference was worth it." The blood drained from his face again. He looked like I'd physically struck him. For a moment he was speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had no idea how I knew. The arrogance of the man was breathtaking. He thought he was so clever, so careful. I don't know what you're talking about," he tried, but the denial was weak, pathetic. "Don't you?" I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up my tablet. I didn't even have to unlock it. The video was still paused on the screen. The image of him and Chloe, frozen in a pre-kiss moment of bliss. I held it up. "The cloud mark. You forgot about the shared family cloud, a 30-second video titled Us, Real Creative. He stared at the screen, and any remaining fight seemed to evaporate, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal panic. "Laura, listen," he pleaded, his voice changing entirely. It was the smooth, placating tone he used when he wanted something. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless mistake. It meant nothing. You and I, this is what's real. We can fix this. I almost laughed. Fix this? You think this is something we can fix? You stood in this house on Friday morning and lied to my face, then spent 48 hours with another woman. You didn't make a mistake, Mark. You made a choice. And this, I said, gesturing to the empty room, is my choice. I chose to redecorate. His desperation soured back into rage. When manipulation failed, aggression was always his next move. "You psycho!" he spat, his face contorting. "You think you can just do this? Sell my property? I'll sue you for every penny. I'll take you to the cleaners. You'll walk away from this marriage with nothing, you hear me? Nothing!" He was puffing his chest out now, trying to loom over me, trying to re-establish the control he'd so thoroughly lost. "Now get your things and get out of my house," he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "This is over. I want you gone." I looked at his finger, then back up at his furious, tear-streaked face. A slow, genuine smile spread across my lips for the first time all weekend. It felt like the sun coming out. He watched me, confused by my sudden change in demeanor, his angry tirade faltering. "Oh, Mark," I said, my voice light, almost pitying. "You still don't get it, do you? You seem to be under a slight misapprehension. Yes, our marriage is over, and yes, someone is leaving, but it isn't going to be me." He just stared at me blankly, not comprehending, so I decided to spell it out for him. "You see, while your father left you his watches, my grandmother left me something a little more practical when she passed 10 years ago. She left me the down payment for this house, a very, very significant down payment. And my lawyer at the time, bless his cynical heart, insisted on one non-negotiable condition. So you might want to check the deed, honey, because while your name is on the mortgage you've been so proudly paying, the title is in my name, and my name alone." The silence that followed my announcement was profound. It was the kind of silence that's so total, you can hear the blood rushing in your own ears. Mark's face went through a bizarre series of micro-expressions. Utter disbelief, followed by frantic mental calculations, then dawning horror, and finally settling on a look of abject defeat. The bully had been defanged. The king had lost his castle. He deflated before my very eyes, his shoulders slumping, the rage and bluster draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, that's not possible. We bought it together." "We lived in it together," I corrected him gently. "I bought it, with my inheritance. You just helped with the bills, for which I'm grateful. It allowed me to make some significant upgrades over the years." I gestured around at the newly painted walls and the refinished hardwood floors projects he'd always complained about the cost of. "It's all meticulously documented, Mark. The prenup you insisted on, the one designed to protect your precious assets, it works both ways. My lawyer was very thorough. Separate property remains separate, I believe is the phrasing." He sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the one piece of furniture he couldn't have dragged onto the lawn. He put his head in his hands, not in sorrow for our lost marriage, I knew, but in a self-pitying despair for his own monumental stupidity. He had been so sure of his power, of his control over me and our life together. He'd seen me as an accessory to his success, not an architect of it. The realization that I held all the cards, that I had always held them, had shattered his entire self-image. "So what now?" he asked, his voice muffled by his hands. "You just kick me out?" "That seems to be the most logical next step, yes," I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. "You told me to get out of your house. I'm simply returning the sentiment. Get out of my house." I walked over to the hallway closet and pulled out the single item I'd saved from the sale, his worn, scuffed leather briefcase. It was the one he'd had since we first met, the one he carried when he was just starting out, full of ambition and, I had thought, love for me. It seemed a fitting symbol for what he was leaving with. I opened it up. Inside was a change of clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt I'd found balled up in the laundry his toothbrush, and a wallet. "I transferred $1,000 into your personal account from the proceeds of the estate sale," I explained. "Consider it a severance package. The rest will go directly to my lawyer's retainer. I suspect I'll be needing it." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Laura, please, don't do this. Where will I go?" "I don't know, Mark," I said, and for the first time, a real sharp edge entered my voice. "Maybe you could try the hotel where you spent the weekend. I'm sure Chloe would be thrilled to have you. Or perhaps you could go to your parents. You can explain to them how your work conference ended with you being homeless. Frankly, it's not my problem anymore." He stood up slowly, a broken man. He took the briefcase from my hands, his fingers brushing mine for a final, fleeting moment. There was no spark, no remnant of the 15 years we'd shared. There was nothing. He walked to the door he had entered so triumphantly just an hour before. He paused with his hand on the knob and looked back at me, a desperate final plea in his eyes. He was searching for a crack in my resolve, a flicker of the old, forgiving Laura he had taken for granted for so long. He found nothing but polished steel. I just stared back at him, my expression unreadable. I didn't offer him pity or comfort. I didn't scream or rage. I just waited. He finally understood. There was no going back. He turned the knob, opened the door, and stepped out into the evening air, closing it softly behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the empty room. I stood there for a long time, just breathing in the quiet of my house. My house. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but underneath it was a deep, powerful current of relief. It wasn't triumph I felt, not really. It was liberation. The sale wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was a cleansing, a violent, chaotic, and utterly necessary ritual to purge my life of his influence, his possessions, his lies. I looked around the sparse living room, at the blank walls and open spaces. It didn't feel empty. It felt clean. It felt like a blank canvas. It felt like my future. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized I was excited to see what I would paint on it.